All right, I'll take the intro.
All right, well, we're recording now, so
All right, welcome back to we don't have a whole lot to talk about, so this is the Fight Sites MMA podcast. Once again, the coronavirus is keeping us, gridlocked. So not a lot is being produced in the MMA world, other than a quick piece of news that we got today. Sriram, do you want to do the honors?
yeah, it's in a big surprise to literally everybody who's been following his
Huge
career.
surprise.
Absolutely shocked. Jon Jones is in his very first legal controversy. You know, every rising star has that kind of thing. We should probably just look past it until it becomes something recurring. That apparently
Really.
he was driving around on drugs and shooting guns in the middle of a quarantine.
We've all been there.
Easy
Right?
mistake to make.
It's a learning kind of thing, right? Like this is one of those mistakes that I feel like you sort of have to make in order to get better in the future.
Yeah, I mean, he
So,
still has a very bright future as a fighter. I don't want him to
very bright
piss that
future.
away.
Yeah. I mean, he's only like 31, 32. I mean, he's at the beginning of his prime. Like
Yeah, he's
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 just
been having a few
he's been
prospect losses, but
he's been performing beautifully lately, we should say.
for sure, just no question.
Um, yeah. So that happened. I mean, fuck knows what actually is gonna happen with him from here on out, but I guess it does kind of fit with our like theme because one of the things we're going to talk about today is light heavyweights. So, Sriram, do you want to give the people our schedule?
Yeah, so this episode is mostly just going to be, as Danny mentioned, it's uh, another one of the boys vibing episodes because there's nothing to talk about at this point. But what is coming up is a fight that I think it carries some implications. Jeremy Stevens trying not to go on four-fight skid against Calvin Kattar, and Kattar is I think a bit more polarizing than he should be. So that's going to be the main topic of this one. And then after that, a question from one of our patrons, Dan DeMarco, which is about our favorite light heavyweight fights because we are not the kindest towards that division, and it includes some of Pride middleweight. So that's our schedule for this one, except for the kind of Jones making fun of period that has to be a part of every single one of them. But yeah, so
And apparently today is actually Calvin Kattar's birthday.
well, be nice, Danny.
So this will be, yeah, I gotta be nice. This was a happy birthday to Calvin Kattar, and we're gonna celebrate by discussing him as a fighter.
You know, it's
A fighter
uncanny.
Sriram absolutely loves, and a fighter who I enjoy. So,
It's actually kind of weird because we did the same thing for Arnold Allen. It landed on his birthday too.
oh shit, that's right, it did, didn't it? Oh man,
One might think we're doing
maybe
this on
that's our
purpose.
theme. Yeah, maybe like maybe we should start doing that then. We should like look at fighter calendars and see like take a look at whose birthday's coming up and then cover them.
God.
Oh, that's a great idea.
These are the specialty episode themes that the people want.
Yeah, this is what happens when we have literally nothing to talk about. The only thing I'll say before we jump into the discussion is please join the Patreon. I know because since the fights have kind of slowed to a halt, some of us are doing more like viewing parties online. So like Ryan and we spent like a good couple hours watching Muay Thai fights and then even like recorded ourselves commentating over Edward Vartanian versus Alexander Chablis the other day. Sandro and I hopped on the Discord and watched a couple fights. I think we're going to try to do a little bit more of those because they're really, really fun. The fight site staff generally commentates the fights and you can listen in. I suppose you can join the conversation if you are so inclined.
If you're
But
smart enough. But if you give
if you're
us money,
smart
we'll
enough,
call you that.
that's right. Give us enough money and you can join. But yeah, no, we're having a lot of fun with those, and I hope that we do more. Maybe we'll do one tonight. I'm not sure. But they're loads of fun. We actually get a chance to kind of watch some fights back, and we don't really have a lot on our schedule to look forward to, so it just makes our lives kind of easy. So
Yeah. So, Calvin Kattar, let's start with this. Why do you not love him and simply enjoy him?
So I like Calvin Kattar. I like his game. He is a very dedicated nuts and bolts boxing technician, which is pretty cool. You don't see a whole lot of those in MMA, I don't think. There's only a few that have really made that approach work. I think he does a lot of really cool stuff as a fighter that we can talk about. What bothers me about Kattar is that he really, really struggles to get his game rolling when someone puts a hitch in his game. He is more counterpuncher than pressure boxer, but he feels compelled to be a pressure boxer more of the time. And a lot of his airtight mechanics start to break down a bit when he's forced to come after guys, specifically if they're longer and they kind of make him reach. Sriram, I know you are one of the biggest Kattar fans in the world. So what is it about Kattar that just butters your egg roll?
Yeah, I mean, featherweight's always been kind of that kind of division because it has, as you mentioned, there aren't a ton of really fundamental boxing types in MMA overall, but featherweight has kind of been the hub for them. If you look through the years, it's had Jose Aldo. Even after he lost the leg kicks, he became a really, really, really good boxer. You have Max Holloway. You have even guys like Shane Burgos. And Calvin Kattar is a pretty solid addition to that, even if, as you mentioned, he's not as versatile as we might want him to be. And honestly, I like Kattar the most because of that Burgos fight, because it was one of the best that I've ever seen in MMA, period. Probably my favorite 3-round fight of all time, even if it lasted 2.1. But yeah, it's phenomenal. And I think a lot of Kattar's problems kind of illustrate problems with MMA as a whole in terms of, coaching and stuff. But you can also look at him as one of the better examples of what someone can do inside those kind of limitations. Because if someone pushes Kattar back, he's really, really. I think that's why the Stevens fight was going to go so well for him, and it still might. I don't know whether that's canceled, but I think that's why it's going to go so well for him, because Stevens is the kind to give him the fight that he wants.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what frustrates me about Kattar a little bit, is that he is a fighter who, when he forces people to play his game, drawing them on, drawing them forward, and then, picking them off as they try to walk him down, he can look, just like a world beater. It's the fact that I don't know how much tact it really takes to get around that approach. Specifically, he looks like a fighter who, when you start throwing wedges into the spokes of his game, it seems like he gets overloaded very quickly, and his efficiency and effectiveness just mutes quite a bit. Some specific examples of what I'm talking about. He is still not good at dealing with kickers. I think the Moicano fight I think some people kind of oversold it after the Moicano fight, and they're like, well, Moicano's just he's just that good a kicker. He's just one of the best kickers in MMA, and that's why Kattar lost. But I think we saw in the Zabit fight, it didn't even really matter. Zabit didn't have to be the same level of kicker that Moicano was to beat Kattar. He just had to sort of broadly replicate the same sort of strategic ideas, and that was enough. And some of that's sort of laid duplicate when you consider that, just how Kattar responded to that Moicano loss. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
It was a bad look, because he was in case people don't know, after the Moicano loss, he said something along the lines
of Diaz.
Yeah, it was a total Diaz kind of thing. It was oh, whatever, he just kicked my leg, good for you, bro, I didn't get fucked up or nothing, you just kicked my leg. And it's well, you really were pretty impotent for the last 2 rounds, and you were getting pretty beat up by the end of the fight. And
Yeah,
it just came from, it seemed like a fighter who just wasn't willing to learn from his losses, and that's an issue for me. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I kind of feel the opposite, honestly, because I think a lot of people looked at the Moicano loss and acted like, Kattar's a new age BJ Penn, that he's like, he's never seen a kick before in his life and he can't ever deal with it. And I think that's kind of it wasn't particular, like, I could understand thinking that right afterwards and even with like the Fishgold fight, but I think Lamas and Zabit showed, I don't think he's an improving fighter, but I think Moicano just made him look bad in a way that only Moicano can. Because, yeah, the Zabit fight, it wasn't an awesome look from him because you kind of have Kattar getting annoyed by kicks even when he's, like, not getting hurt by, like, see, definitely got hurt a lot by Moicano. Let's get that out of the way because Moicano kind of beat his leg to shit and then beat his head to shit. But against Zabit, it kind of seemed like Zabit's consistency in not giving Kattar the range he wanted because Kattar's like a pocket boxer and Zabit's just, he wanted to stand on the outside and kick, and even if he wasn't successful, Zabit was willing to just keep going with it, and that frustrated Kattar. It reminded me a bit of Robbie Lawler, just in a, early stage Robbie Lawler, where if someone gave him the game that he wanted, he was really, really, really good. But if someone just, kind of kicked him and he would have some trouble, not necessarily just with defense, but also with temperament. I'm not sure how much to take into account the reaction after the Moicano fight, because one thing that a lot of people missed right after the Burgos fight was how much of a finished product Kattar was, even at that point. Because, Shane Burgos was like a pretty decent favorite at that time. Kattar had one fight in the UFC, but Kattar took a long time to get to the UFC. He was like a decade in at that point. And
Yeah.
even when he made it to the UFC, he was a replacement for Doo Ho Choi, which is kind of hilarious and ironic in retrospect. But, Kattar's, I don't think he's improving, but I think he's quite a bit better at dealing with kicks than people might say, even if he's not comfortable or likes doing them.
Yeah, I think I see that. I mean, I don't think that the way Lamas approached him was, Lamas is never going to approach like a technician on the feet with a whole lot of like poise. That's generally how Lamas loses. I think you touched on something pretty important, and that is that Calvin Kattar is a subtle fighter. Let's say that, because he does have a lot of granularity to his game. He has an understanding of rhythm. He's got I wrote an article, I think after UFC 238, that he, used like 4 different variations of the jab in one fight. Like he's got many jabs that he can use, which is great. And he's got like very sound footwork off the back foot specifically. He takes L steps on the outside. He kind of V steps into range sometimes. He pivots well. All that's great. The question for fighting Kattar is like, what can you do to kind of, as Phil McKenzie has said it, slough the subtlety away from him? Like, what can you do to kind of just draw out the bigger, more pronounced mistakes in his game? And I think one of them is actually just a physiological thing. As I said earlier, he doesn't like to chase people. Like Zabit is I don't think Zabit has peerless footwork by any means, but he is a good outside mover. Like he's mobile. He's got decent cage craft. I like that he's, he takes angles off the back foot. He shifts off the back foot, which sometimes gets him into trouble, but he's a pretty good outside mover. I think you'd agree, Sriram, right?
Yeah, I would. I'm not a huge fan of Zabit, but he's good at that.
And it's something he's good at. And he's good at countering people who sort of try to step in on him with the left hook, or just framing them off. So he's also, we should say, a size bully for featherweight. He's like 6'2". And so he actually pretty smartly recognized the fact that if Kattar was going to be, to do his best work, it was mostly in the more static positions in the pocket. It was when Zabit was actually able to, 1, stay mobile within the pocket, and 2, stay mobile on the outside that Kattar was forced to kind of running in at him. And that's compounded with the fact that I don't think Kattar is a very good fighter without his jab. Like, we can talk all day about how good his jab is, but as we've seen in his losses, he sort of needs the jab. Like, without it, I think it messes with his range. I don't think he can't build as much without it as we, like you saw in the Burgos fight versus the Zabit fight. When he's denied his lead hand range, he kind of, like I said, he has to resort to kind of crushing the distance with pure foot speed.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the interesting thing, is that Kattar's the rare fighter who's actually better on the back foot than he is on the front foot, because a lot of fighters, they're uncomfortable moving backwards, and they like having space behind them to move, because if a guy just swings, they can just move backwards. But Kattar, he not only has the kind of defensive depth that he showed in the Burgos fight to be able to, defend shots in range and come back with counters, which he's very, very good at. He had one really nice pull counter against Burgos. That's like one of the best non-Aldo ones I've ever seen. But it's also that it allows him to paradoxically almost dictate the range better, because if someone moves in on him, he can keep them away with the jab, and they're not longer than his jab if they're moving into him. Where if he's forced to come forward, they're the ones kind of dictating the range, if that makes sense. It's like a weird way to put it, because he's not as good at covering distance with the jab as he is at enforcing distance with the jab. So it's the kind of thing where, like, for example, someone like Chris Fishgold could come out and just like storm the gates and maybe give him some more trouble than he wanted. But once Fishgold started settling into like a pace that he actually wanted to fight at for an extended period, he was still moving forward, and Kattar could just bruise him up. Now, I think you could kind of look at Zabit and Moicano as like along the same scale. And one matchup that we talked about a bunch with Kattar is kind of the opposite end of that scale from Renato Moicano, which is Yair Rodriguez, which is take all the craft away from long kicker and see how Kattar does. And it's pretty concerning to me that for all of Kattar's depth, and he's inarguably better at fighting, better at what he does than Yair Rodriguez, there's a solid chance he loses that fight.
Yeah. I brought that up, and I still think it still is a bit of a concern to me, because that is kind of the question with Kattar, right? If you look at like Moicano, who dominated Kattar, and really just completely neutralized him, and then really started to take him apart, and then you go to Zabit, who won a close decision with him, but still like broadly in the same kind of way. And then you sort of, like you said, you kind of move the slider down even further, and it's like, well, now what about Yair, who is hyper athletic, like very fast and dynamic, and just a total mess of a technical fighter. But he is very willing. Like, he's mobile and he's willing. How does Kattar do if he's forced to track someone like that down? There is one specific mechanical thing that I actually want to bring up about Kattar, which is kind of strange, considering that Kattar has some of the best, punching mechanics that you're probably going to see in MMA. In terms of, keeping his feet under him, at least, like I said, when he's sort of contending in his sort of his mid-range. But I don't think Kattar actually has a particularly good left hook. I think he would be better served if he had one. Mechanically, he sort of, the arc of his left hook is pretty wide. So he'll like, it's more of a, how do I describe this? It's not a narrow, tight left hook like Zabit can throw, where he's kind of closing the door off in exchange. He's, it's sort of this longer shot, which is basically coming at a similar trajectory, like a similar spatial track as his jab. And then the right hand usually follows behind it. He does a good job of hooking to the body occasionally. Like, sometimes in the Burgos fight, he and Burgos would anchor. Like, their right crosses would basically cross, and they would lock, they would basically both be leaning over their lead hip, and their right hands would be locked together, and then Kattar would break the anchor with, like, a left hook to the body. But he doesn't do it that often. And I sort of wonder how some of his, like, some of his difficulties with guys like Moicano and Zabit would have been amended if he actually just had a better left hook in exchanges, because it was Zabit who was landing the left hook, and it was Moicano who was landing the left hook, not Kattar.
Yeah, I think it's one thing because at points in the Burgos fight, you kind of had Kattar like throwing the jab, and like playing off the parry with the left hook, and that's kind of how he beat Lamas too, where he jabbed to the body a bunch, to use the jab, used kind of the feint or the initial motion that was similar, and Lamas dropped his hands, and he'd throw that, as you mentioned, a pretty wide, very, very committed left hook. It was like a really boxing-style left hook, where, like, he bent his knee inwards and cracked him, and then came back with the right hand. It was a gorgeous knockout, but yeah, as you mentioned, it's not really a thing in exchanges. Kattar's counterpunching is kind of right hand heavy, whereas lead hand is pretty jab heavy. So you could look at pretty much any of his fights to see that, but I think it's an interesting thing to look at because he's not generally, like, even with his jab, which should be probably like just as good a distance covering weapon, it's his footwork that's the problem on the front foot. And even if he had a left hook, he would probably just be, missing on the right hand he was trying to herd Zabit into, because he just wasn't in front of Zabit as well as he could be. So I think it's an interesting question, but I think it would have mattered more in his wins than in his losses, because, like, if he had a consistent left hook, he could have been hitting Burgos with that a lot, with the way he had Burgos biting on the jab. But with Moicano, he just kind of sat outside range, so I don't think that would have mattered.
I guess it's more just like his left hook in some ways functions more as a hurting strike than it does like a, like I'm gonna trap you with this, not I'm gonna hurt you with this. And that also sort of compiles with the fact that when Kattar hits the body, it's lovely to watch. Like I said, that in the first round of that Burgos fight, like the anchor position that they lock in, and then Kattar breaking it with a left hook to the body is just really pretty stuff that you don't see that often in MMA. He did some he threw some nice long straight shots to the body against Lamas. And then he kind of, he started to figure out that Zabit is just like, really prioritizes defense to his head, which is fine, but he's got a very long torso, so he actually started jabbing to the body and was able to build off that a bit. But he doesn't do it that often, right? He doesn't do it often enough that it's like, that it becomes a consistent threat, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's something you mentioned before the Zabit fight, is that he targets the body more than he breaks it down. And
I did, that's right.
Yeah, that's kind of the difference between him and Shane Burgos, which is that Burgos kind of came forward and like smashed his body every chance he got, where Kattar, he found the opportunities, like the really safe places where he could hit the body, but it was more of like a way to throw off his attacks. It's like Junior Dos Santos, where like if he throws the body jab, it's not actually like a body attack. It's just something to throw you away from the fact that he really wants to hit your head. That's what Kattar does. But it's not attrition. It's just a throw off.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the thing, is like I think Kattar really does like to snipe in exchanges. Like he is a very good counterpuncher, and he's like, when he's actually able to get his range and either draw guys in or actually just set up on a sort of, mid-range opponent, it is like he really does thrive on kind of, creating those serious collisions in those entries. It's just when he's denied of that, I don't know how good he is at actually like sort of commanding the fight to get back to the place where he's best. Like Zabit is, there are some things that Zabit does better than Moicano, and there are things that Zabit does worse than Moicano, but I think it was just the fact that Zabit keyed in on like the sort of broad brush strokes of like, oh yeah, I can do that too. Like that's these are the things that it probably, takes to beat him. Counter left hooks as he's coming in, kick the leg when he hits the jab. You can actually, Zabit actually did push Kattar back with combinations too, which is pretty good. So it's like, that is kind of the thing for me, is like, I sort of wonder how many other fighters in this division could just see that kind of stuff and be like, okay, he's a little bit of an IQ test. Like, I can probably, like he's a high IQ test, but he is something of an IQ test, where part of it is just sort of not letting him, play his game.
Well, I think I kind of struggle with figuring out how Kattar does moving forward, because there are some good matchups for him, but as you mentioned, the Zabit fight, Zabit's a pretty massive size bully. Moicano, he moved up to lightweight since, and featherweight has had a couple of guys like that. It seems to be kind of the sweet spot for that kind of fighter. Conor McGregor was a pretty absurd size bully at featherweight. So yeah. There are just a lot of featherweights like that. So if you have a physiological issue with, or not a technical issue with someone else's physiology, it's kind of rough for you. And Yair is kind of the
he is on that side. Yeah, Yair's big. Like he is a big featherweight. Easily could be a lightweight, and he's just like super fast and dynamic. Even though that's kind of what he's built his game on. I think that the question there is that, like, Kattar isn't really a small featherweight though.
He's pretty big, but he's not like the massive type.
And that's the kind of weird thing. I mean, Burgos was visibly bigger than Kattar, but Burgos might be the biggest featherweight on the roster apart from Zabit. And Burgos doesn't really resemble Zabit that much in terms of style. I'm not trying to disparage Kattar. Like I said, I like watching him fight. He's a really fun, exciting fighter who does a lot of cool things. He does some things that are pretty unique to MMA, similar to Lawler, but he does have some of the same issues. And like you touched on the fact that he's someone who is probably a finished product. If we're being honest, like he's someone who could, he might make improvements here and there. He still looks, for someone who's that, far into his career, he still looks physically like he's, able to compete at this level. It hasn't looked like, I'm trying to think of a good comparison piece. It hasn't looked like a Gilbert Melendez kind of thing, where it just, when Melendez was fighting like Pettis, and it just looked like
awful.
His body just couldn't keep up with what it wanted to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it doesn't look like that.
Yeah, I think the thing is that Kattar, he's not an unathletic fighter. He's not a super athletic fighter, but the way his game is built isn't built on athleticism. He seems like he's a fine 5-round fighter, honestly, given the pace of the Burgos fight and how he was taking over the Zabit fight. But I think you're kind of getting to the point where he's probably, if we're being honest, he's probably not getting a 5-rounder with the way that both main events work, with random heavyweight fights getting 5-rounders, and just the way that his career has kind of gone, where he looks like, a comparison I saw on Twitter, which kind of hurt me a little inside, but might be accurate, is that he might be a Cub Swanson, which is he gets a main event every now and then, but he's kind of just a test for prospects moving forward. And he's really good. And I think there are very, very winnable matchups for him at the top. Someone like Ortega kind of feels like a slightly elevated Burgos type fight for him. I think he'd box up Korean Zombie, but it's just he's at the point where I'm not sure he's on an upward trajectory anymore. Stevens is winnable, but it's just the feeling that he might start looking worse than he should. He already has in some respects, but against opponents that shouldn't trouble him in that way.
Yeah. I don't know how he matches up with the top. That's kind of the thing about it, is that there are some guys who I think he could, Stevens, if I'm being all honesty to show his face, Stevens seems like it's a pretty easy matchup for Kattar. Stevens is going to walk him down. He's going to plod. Stevens has been looking a little bit more fragile as of late. He is someone who is very easy to get in and out on. He's not good at cutting off lateral movers. He is, imminently jabbable. He has to plant his feet to throw. Everything about it seems like Kattar's just going to pick him apart and probably finish him. But like I do sort of wonder, like you said, Cater doesn't seem like he's going to be getting a lot of 5 round opportunities. Um, and so he has to make do with 3 rounds, and like, he is maybe like that kind of like 5 round fighter in a 3 round world. But like I don't know if I like him against Zombie, like against someone who's actually willing to just counterpunch him and has really heavy hands, like who's a legit knockout artist who can counter his jab. Um, there's a chance that Cater could just pick him apart, but there's also a chance that Cater could just die. Um, Someone like Ortega, like Cater really would have to mind his P's and Q's in the clinch. He could not. Ortega is not a good wrestler, but he is good at making, sort of attacking in transitions and getting grappling exchanges out of, seemingly out of thin air. And I don't know I think with the amount that Zabit was actually able to just kind of threaten him with like the body lock and threaten him in the clinch, I sort of wonder if, some of those same kinds of situations wouldn't mean that Ortega wouldn't just jump on him. Like I don't know. He's an interesting one, and he's always going to be a fun one to watch. It's just like it kind of seemed like the Zabit fight was like his chance to really, set,
Yeah.
come out as a deserving like top 5 contender, and he kind of bungled it a little bit. Even though I admit that he was robbed of 5 rounds. I also don't think it's also worth saying I don't actually think Cater hits that hard. Like I think after the Burgos fight and then like the Fishgold Lamas fights, people looked at him like, oh yeah, Cater's a knockout artist. He's a boxer. He knocks people out. That's what he does. I think he's, like I said, when his mechanics are in play, he's very, very good mechanically, and he is very accurate. But I don't think he actually has I don't think he has really naturally heavy hands. He landed like pretty clean on Zabit at several occasions and didn't really seem to do a lot until Zabit just kind of got exhausted. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to gauge, but I tend to lean in that direction, that it's more of, I mean, in general, it's kind of a function of mechanics more than pure power. Because if you look at someone like, Jessica Andrade, who clearly did have that kind of natural power, but squandered it by being awful at punching. It caters, a lot of it's just being really, really good at the act of punching. Looking above Cater at the rankings, he's number 9 right now. I think it's after Moicano left the rankings, so he was number 10, now he's number 9. He beats Jeremy Stevens, as you mentioned, probably. The leg kicks might be a thing, but like
I don't know.
I don't think Stevens is any better at kicking than Lamas.
No.
It's just like it's something that he can do to Gilbert Melendez, and as much as we don't like Cater's kick defense, he's better than Gilbert Melendez at that. Josh Emmett, Emmett's not going to do anything to him.
He should probably. I mean, unless Emmett just
Emmett shouldn't do things to him. He might, but he shouldn't.
Unless Emmett just does the same thing that he did against Michael Johnson, which is kind of just get beaten and then just belts Cater as hard as he can. But yeah, no, I don't think I could pick him there. Maybe he just rushes him over with double legs. I don't know. Is Emmett even a good wrestler? I don't know.
Emmett, he hasn't wrestled a ton, but I think Cater showed
Is
some.
Emmett good at anything?
Not. He's good at being a puncher. He's not good at the act of punching, but he can punch hard.
Whatever. Who fucking cares about Josh Emmett?
Emmett. Yeah, but Emmett probably just gets stranded on the end of a jab, and
They could do Arnold Allen. They could do Cater versus Arnold Allen.
That'd be
fun. That'd be a very, very winnable fight for Cater.
Yeah, I mean so since the last time we talked about Arnold Allen, the Nick Lentz performance was kind of not it at all.
Oh yeah. Oh no, not at all. Which is why I said I'm like you should be you of all people should be pushing for this fight.
I mean, I think it's kind of like I kind of feel the same way about it that I do about Yair Rodriguez in differing ways, which is that the other guy isn't nearly as good at anything, but kind of has this one specific thing that might trouble Cater more than it should. For Yair, it's just like being long and kicking, and for Arnold Allen, it's like maybe being southpaw, which complicates the jab, might give Kattar some some frustration. But yeah, I think that'd be a fun fight.
I don't know. I don't actually think Allen would trouble him that much. Like, I think I think Kattar would have to deal with the southpaw thing a bit. But he would be, as much as I said, like, I don't think Kattar punches that hard. He would be decidedly the bigger puncher than
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think he'd be able to, he would out horsepower Allen and like probably keep a higher pace. It'd be fun though. Allen would kick with him. Like, he does have the
one thing
southpaw.
Allen does well, the leg kicking.
So that's if we're playing matchmaker, that's my pick. I think that would be a fun fight, and it would be a good win for Kattar. And like those are the kind of fights that he should be getting. And if he can put together enough of a run, like maybe we'll see him against like Sadiq Youssef, which would be also pretty badass.
Yeah, I think most of the rank, there are weird guys like Ryan Hall, which I don't really want to see Kattar against because that would be really, really dumb. But, most of the rankings are fun. Frankie Edgar, he's a non-entity at this point.
They could do Edgar Kattar if you.
Edgar's moving down, right?
Is he? I don't fucking know, dude. I don't even care.
God damn. But Yair, we kind of talked about. I think it kind of comes down to whether Yair is worse on the back foot than Kattar is on the front foot, and that's a very depressing conversation to be had.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess just what I'd say is, like, for me, I just have reasonable expectations for Kattar. After the Moicano fight, I kind of like looked at him and was like, yeah, we're probably not going to get a title contender, but we might still get a really fun like top 10 guy who wins more fights than he loses, and he like you said, the Burgos fight was tremendous. Kattar Zabit is a great fight.
Yeah, Kattar Zabit was real. I can't get over the fact that it wasn't 5 because that just seemed like
it would have been awesome if it was 5, but like it was also just, there's just a lot of great exchanges in there. Like there's Zabit for his part did a very good job of like actually working the body similar to the way that Burgos did, where he kind of trap him along the fence, and then as Kattar was exiting, like throw a long left hook to the body was really nice. You kind of actually got to see Cater's counterpunching late in that fight. Like Zabit's kicking was very nice as he slowed down. It didn't actually impede Cater's movement too much. He did a really nice job of like kind of pivoting and taking angles, and then started jabbing the body himself. It's a great fight. Like he's had 2, I think both the Burgos fight and the Kattar fight, which I think are fantastic. So he's always going to be a fighter to watch. I would say I have a little bit more measured expectations for him than some people seem to have. Yeah. Some people being you.
Even I don't have expectations for him as champion, especially with Volkanovski on the top, because the fight Volkanovski fought last time is nightmarish for Kattar.
And I don't even know if Kattar could handle himself in the clinch.
Yeah,
Volk would probably just kick his leg, right?
Yeah, Volk, like the way Volk fought Max, the outfighting, leg kicking thing, that's awful for Kattar. But other than that, I think Kattar would have fun, reasonably even fight. Like for Ortega, I find it being at worst even, at best Kattar just lights him up. For Zabit, we saw that was really, really fun, and Kattar probably wins over 5. I'm just gonna keep saying that every time the fight comes up. TKZ would be really, really cool because it's just, the jabber versus the jab counter dynamic. It's just, like, I think he's, like, a solid top 5 in talent. It's just that there are certain matchups there that irritate him more than, like, I think if you look at, so this is kind of a tangent, but it's kind of weird how, like, the axiom of styles make fights has spread, but people still get kind of mad when you point out that, like, the worst quote-unquote fighter could win. And I think that's what would happen with Yair Rodriguez and Calvin Kattar, maybe. That's kind of what happened with Zabit and Kattar, if you look at it as like a 5-round contest. It's just, like, there are certain
You say that so much.
I should. That's the gimmick now. This is the Zabit Kattar should have been 5 rounds. Hey, you made it an article title. I get to mention it a few times.
Well, I made it an article title because I really just wanted to see 2 more rounds because I thought it was a great fight.
I wanted to see 2 more rounds because Kattar would have beat his ass.
I think Kattar probably would have run away with it. But like, I mean, it is also notable that he kind of let Zabit do what he wanted to do until he got tired. And that is also not really something you can look at and be like, oh yeah, that's a consistent like long-term performer. Like if you're gonna sort of just be befuddled by the same sorts of things that you've struggled with in the past, and it's just kind of waiting for your opponent to fall apart, like I don't think that's a really good look either. So I mean, you have to sort of you got to be a little more even-handed with it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think Kattar would have won, but it wasn't a good performance. At least it wasn't a good performance overall, knowing what we know about Zabit in like round 3. But I think you hit on it the first time, like earlier rather, which was that Kattar's kind of turning into a 5-round fighter in a 3-round world. It's kind of the same problem we saw in Brasilia with like Alexei Kunchenko to an extent, where like by the time the really feely kind of pocket boxer makes the reads that he needs to like absolutely demolish a guy, he's got like 2 minutes left and there's not much left to do in the fight. So yeah, it's gonna be a struggle, but
that's the thing. That's kind of why that Zabit fight is also just sort of funny it's just kind of funny in a vacuum, because it was a great fight where you have Kattar, who is, almost certainly going to win over 5 rounds because he's the 5-round fighter, and he might never get a 5-round fight again. And then you have Zabit, who is poised to, Zabit almost certainly is going to fight in, a 5-round fight before his career is over. It looks like, they're priming him to be a title contender of sorts. And he looks like the kind who's not going to be able to make that work at all.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, Zabit had to win that fight because that's just how it works. Yeah, it made me laugh. I thought that was pretty funny.
MMA never fails to be cruelly ironic. It's like how Yair Rodriguez and Jeremy Stevens, it got canceled in 5 rounds, moved to 3, and then it looked like Stevens would actually demolish him over 5, but then Yair won the 2-1 in 3.
Oh yeah.
That was the best. Yeah. So, Kattar gang, that's all I have left to say. And also the 5 rounds thing.
I like Kattar a lot more than Rob Font, if that's any indication. And he's proven himself to be a lot better than Rob Font.
Same. I mean, who else is a teammate? He's got Kyle Bochniak. Both are better than Kyle Bochniak.
Wait, whoa. Bochniak is a teammate of Kattar and Font?
I'm pretty sure.
Then why did Kattar struggle? Okay, whatever. That actually kind of makes me downgrade Kattar a little bit, knowing that they had a guy fight Zabit for 3 rounds.
I mean, what did Bochniak even do though? Bochniak just kind of got beat up.
He stayed in his face and he started hitting the body.
Did he?
And I don't think Kattar started hitting the body until like the halfway through round 3.
Did it? Yeah, I mean maybe.
If Kattar had started hitting Zabit's body from the word go, he may have finished him in 3. But
probably.
I don't think Kattar's smart.
Yeah, I mean, as we know, like there has to be a certain amount of like tactical intelligence with a fighter who like builds off a jab as well as Kattar does. But strategically, he's just kind of not it, and that's kind of where his ceiling's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of. The 3-round strategy is just like it seems just kind of like a one-size-fits-all sort of thing. So, anyway,
we're done with Kattar, the best fighter on the planet. Let's move on.
Yeah. Oh, we're way done with Kattar.
Yeah. So we have the light heavyweight question, which is, and I'll pull it up overall, but I mean the gist is that it's, do we hate light heavyweight so much that we cannot pick a few fights that we like from it?
We had a good discussion on this last time, but for some reason our audio got corrupted, which is frustrating because it was a really good discussion.
And also now we have to spend a second time talking about light heavyweights.
Yeah, and who wants to do that? I think we can probably sort of fast forward to the actual conclusion that we made. I think that light heavyweight has always been a very historically significant division. I don't necessarily think it's ever been a very good skill-wise division, but I don't think beating anybody in that era, like whether that was Shogun or Machida or give me some others, Rampage, Forrest Griffin. I mean, Jesus Christ.
The GOAT.
I don't think any of those wins are more impressive than like, say beating Korean Zombie or Calvin Kattar, for instance.
Or Rob
Uh,
Font.
yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, I know. That's
Um,
just
but as far as fights, light heavyweight fights that we actually think are very good, Shogun Hua versus Little Nog in Pride was a great fight. And this is back when Shogun actually was Shogun. Is it weird to you that Shogun, like, I feel like Shogun has spent more of his career shot than he has in his physical prime.
yeah, it's
Do you know what I
like
mean?
yeah, that's like people have an image of him as a
Oh, it's
striker based on like the
weird.
improvements he made while shot to hang on the feet. But he wasn't really that much of a striker to start with. It's just that like I think it might be more accurate to put it as he spent more time okay, well, he spent the more important time of his career while washed. It's just that people didn't acknowledge that he was washed until he like almost lost to Paul Craig.
I need to take a look at this. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, so he started his career in 2002, and I think it was 2002 to 2009 when he fought Machida the first time. That was his like athletic prime. And it's still even in his quote unquote athletic prime, he still got subbed by Forrest Griffin. So let's like
Temper that a little bit.
take that into consideration. Um and then now from like 2010 to 2020, he's had like he's probably had even looks like 20% more fights. And boy howdy has it not been pretty. Good Lord, dude. All right, so I guess that's true. I guess he really has been. I'm sorry, I'm making this way too much about Shogun. I guess the point is like, um, it was a long walk for a short glass of water. The point being, Shogun, when Shogun was actually Shogun, back in Pride, his fight with Little Nog is a great one because it's actually it's great to see Shogun kind of a little bit ahead of the MMA meta at the time, where he was attacking the body, he was attacking in transitions where he would he would attack in like clinch situations and like trying to sort of his ground and pound in particular in kind of scrambles and so forth. Like he was a vicious ground and pound fighter. Um, I admittedly haven't watched that fight in a while, but from what I remember, you can kind of see even a super nascent sport. Shogun has shown some understanding of like what it means to be an quote unquote MMA fighter, like attacking in those kinds of interstitial spaces is a really good thing. Sriram,
Yeah.
what are your favorite light heavyweight fights?
So I mentioned the same thing before, but I think it's kind of I mean, I can't say that because you guys haven't heard the first one, but it's kind of weird to hold light heavyweight to like good fight standards because you're not going to find a Cater Burgos there. But the only way to be able to find a fight that's really good at light heavyweight is kind of the flaws match up more than like two guys' strengths match up really well. And I think that's kind of what made a fight like Cormier Gus really fun, even if it were like messy as hell and like really gross, because it's like Cormier can't not get hit by anything Gus throws, but also Gus can't not break stance and run every time DC just walks forward. So it was just like it was fun in a light heavyweight way, and I think that's the kind of fight you have to look at for light heavyweight. But honestly, after last time, I think there's a pretty easy front runner for the UFC, which you mentioned, and that is Jones Cormier 2. So
Yep. I think, well, I'm going to assume that most of our listeners are probably pretty familiar with our opinions on Jon Jones
hopefully
and Daniel Cormier as fighters. We do not love them,
we barely
but
like them.
uh, but I think we do have to give them credit for that fight, because that is a genuinely great fight, where it looked like both guys brought out the best in each other. It was, to me at least, felt like the last fight either of them really cared about, where it felt like it really mattered for like a legacy thing, and it really like they really cared about showing up in their best best physical selves and so forth. And so, you know, because before that you had Cormier's fight with his second fight with Rumble, which was just awful.
Rumbling.
Yeah, I mean like Rumble just looked as bad as you can imagine, and you know I don't even think DC really looked that good. It didn't look like he really wanted to show up and fight that fight. And then, but you could tell against Jon Jones, he wanted to win that fight. Like he really wanted to get in there and fuck Jones up, which was great. And like he did a lot better. He did a lot of the right things in that fight. Like he stayed in punching range a lot better. He didn't just get locked up and then leaned on and kind of, you know, ground out in the clinch. He did a better job of framing. He would actually try to retract his lead leg from Jones kicking it. He even tried to counter kick Jones going low. And while DC is never going to be one of MMA's great kickers, I respect the effort, and so should you. And then Jones's approach in that fight was actually really quite amazing. He did a lovely job of like giving out just enough information to DC, forcing DC to react, kind of going back on the defensive, assessing it. He did a great job, a tremendous job with the body work. That is as good as any of his body work has ever been. Kind of running DC into these intercepting knees. Like you really get to see the grit and the toughness of both guys. Like, you know, Jon Jones takes he takes DC's best punches. Like DC was throwing as hard as he could, and Jones just didn't look bothered in the slightest. You see just how freakish his chin actually is. But you also kind of get to see DC's poise and his own kind of class and grit in that fight. And as much as we complain about them as technicians, while there is a lot of room to complain about them, I think Sriram and I can agree. And I talked, Ryan also said the same thing. I talked with him about this the other day. Like, you got to give him credit when credit is due. And in this case, I think that is a genuinely terrific fight that we got to see the best out of both guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's, there's, as you mentioned, there's a lot to say about them in the negative, but within those limitations, Cormier fought a very good fight against Jones. It's just that, it was, again, the same sort of problems that sunk in the first time with dealing with body work sunk in the second time. It's just that Jones looked better than ever, as you mentioned, hitting the body, keeping it's kind of striking given how good Jones's body work looked in that fight, that Stipe didn't start hitting it from the get-go, but that's a conversation for another time about heavyweights being inherently stupid. But yeah, it was a very good performance from both. You kind of hit on all the points that I would have made. Jones looking as freakishly durable as he always has. Cormier looking almost as freakishly durable as he always has, short of getting knocked out. And, it was just both guys matching up in a way more compelling way than one would expect, because the way that Cormier fought the first time, I figured he'd come in and do the same thing the second time, kind of, because he hasn't been the kind of adaptive fighter that one might want him to be. But he made a lot of good adjustments in the second fight, and, it worked out. As good as it could work out against Jon Jones, the best Jon Jones there's ever been, it worked out.
Yeah. I don't really know what's left for MMA, and that didn't make any sense. I don't know what's left for Jon Jones in MMA. I don't know how much more he really wants to compete in this sport. He's shown up, looking pretty flat against his last couple opponents. I think a lot. Again. He might get stripped again, and then what do we get? Blachowicz versus Reyes. Fuck me.
Oh God.
Who even gives a shit, right?
Yeah.
But whatever it is, this did seem like the last fight to him that really, really mattered. And he fought like it. I thought he looked like I said, I think his actual strategic approach was a good one. One of the reasons it's a really great fight is just the pace is super, super high for light heavyweight. Because they had basically the same fight that they had the first time. The numbers are almost identical in terms of significant strikes landed, except they had it over 3 rounds instead of 5. Like Jones came out of the gate and threw like 80 something strikes in the first round. Like it was an insane pace for Jones's standards, who's like one of his main weapons is his pace. Uh, so, and I think DC couldn't keep that pace, and I think Jones knew that, especially combined with the body work. But yeah, I mean there really aren't many. There aren't many light heavyweight fights that I think are really special, but that is one that you can watch a lot of times and is both action packed. There was a story behind it that people actually cared about. There was, it is a violent, fast paced fight. The finish is still brutal. And I think you just got to appreciate it, is the fact that, like, while MMA really is not very good past middleweight, and I guess after Adesanya Romero, even that's up for debate. But like, I think you can appreciate what two of the best MMA fighters above 185, for whatever that's worth, they put on a great fight. So.
Yeah, I think that's all there is to say about that. Any other Jones news come out in this hour about how he, ran over a nun?
Let's take a look. Explore Jon Jones.
Stay home during quarantine, he says.
Aggravated. I like Aaron Bronstetter. This is another troubling chapter in Jones's life and career, and I hope that he is able to receive the help he needs.
Is it even troubling anymore? It's kind of just expected.
Yeah, it just is what it is. I don't even know how to count how many it's been so far. God, dude, that's really weird. Has the UFC made a statement? The UFC is aware. Organization has been in contact with the management team, gathering additional information. Okay, so he hasn't officially been stripped yet. Nothing is.
I mean, he might not, because there aren't going to be fights for a bit, so he might be back by then.
All right. Yeah, well, fuck it, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm good on this. Sriram, would you like to watch some fights on Discord tonight?
Yeah, I'll probably be. I have an accounting exam tomorrow, so maybe.
Take your test, friend. Go
it's tomorrow. So I might procrastinate a little more to watch some ACA.
Yeah. Because we'll probably be doing more of those. So for the Patreons, we will see you on the Discord commentating Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis. And for those of you who aren't Patreons, shell out that credit card, because
you're going to miss out on all our criticism.
We're not making any money in this quarantine either. So thank you guys for joining us this week. Hopefully the audio actually works and we can put this up.
Yeah.
But this was tons of fun. Again, next week, I think we'll have to take a look at what we have. We might do another Patreon. Maybe we'll do another fighter of interest. Maybe we'll have a big discussion on Robert Whittaker.
Oh, that'd be cool.
That would be fun. That'd be a fun one. Probably have a lot to say. So thank you guys again. Appreciate it. Sriram, sign us off, brother.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you